alliance together. But also, what we see Vladimir Putin doing, he's attacking Ukraine, but also this is really an attack against the West.
Yes.
I mean, he's wanting to, fragment NATO. And so now I don't know that that's working, but that was his intention. Right. And that's exactly what Gog's going to do in the end times. It's going to be an attack against Israel. I believe when Israel's under their covenant with Antichrist, it's really going to be an attack against the West as well. So a lot of the parts of this are fitting together, plus his growing alliance with Iran. That's in the background to all this, which is a nation that's also mentioned in Ezekiel 38. So there's all kinds of there's so many facets of this really that fit in with being a build-up to what's predicted in Ezekiel 38 and 39.
This first article is from Axios, and it says U.S. urges Americans to consider leaving Russia immediately, and it says more airline flights have been canceled in and out of Russia, and American citizens in the country should consider leaving immediately, the U.S. Embassy in Moscow warned in a security alert Sunday. What do you think about that? I mean, when the U.S. Embassy is warning our citizens to get out of a country, do you believe that there's a significant threat of us going to war with Russia?
Well, I just think right now, as you just said earlier, with Putin, just his instability right now, I think there's just a fear we don't know what he's going to do. The Cold War, during the Cold War, you had Soviet Union and you had the United States. Both were, had nuclear weapons. You could destroy each other, but both were considered to be rational, right, and sane. And so you kind of had a balance of power there. And now it's kind of that's been thrown off, because now with Putin, the way he's acting now, I think they're really wondering, what could he do? Because my sense is he's going to have to save face somehow in this. That's and right. How far will he go to do that? And how brutal is he going to get? He's not going to be humiliated or embarrassed in this, that's right, because that's the very thing that he saw happen to the Soviet Union when it was split up. Right. That's what he's trying to regain. So he will not allow himself and Russia to be humiliated. I think however far he has to go to not allow that to happen, he'll go. So I think it is wise to get our people out of Russia at this time.
Jimmy has discussed Iran's nuclear power, but what about Russia's power? And this is from Hala. Just today, Putin threatened any nation that interfered with their attack on Ukraine. He said there would be repercussions like they have never seen. He was referring to the nuclear bomb. What is your opinion concerning this threat? How good is their nuclear program? And is there a chance he could use it on the USA or the U.S. with China's help? What do you think about that, Mark?
Well, it's a real threat. They have more nuclear weapons than anybody in the world. Russia does. They have a lot more than we do. Now, again, how many do you need to blow up the world? But they have, their stockpile's massive. Would he do that? We don't know. Again, how far will Putin go? How crazy is he? And what is he? I don't think he's crazy in the sense of insane or something, but calculating. He's not going to be humiliated. Right. He's not going to be embarrassed. That happened in 1991. He's lived with that. He calls that the greatest geopolitical disaster of the 20th century. The worst day of his life, he said, is when he's clearing out his papers in East Berlin and having to go back to Russia. It was humiliation. And so he was when he was a KGB agent. So he doesn't want that to happen again. And I think he'll do whatever he has to do. And right now, too, he's going to get backed more and more into a corner. There's going to be trouble at home. Their economy is going to begin to collapse. And the worst kind of a bear, is a bear that's been robbed of her cubs and then that's cornered.
Right.
And once he's cornered like this, we don't know what he will do. And I think there's a lot of people who are asking that question. So we don't know how far he'll go. We don't know if this is a bluff that he's making, but I think in his own mind, he would be willing to do it to save face and to not have his country go down and be humiliated.
I agree with that. This is from Michelle. It says, I am confused about something. I have heard about the great military might of Russia, yet he seems to be struggling. Is this because he hasn't fully lent his true military and capabilities on Ukraine? It seems to me that Israel could squish him, hands down. What do you think about that?
Well, there's military operations are notoriously difficult. You've got all these long supply lines and all. If Vladimir Putin wants to go in there and take Ukraine, he can take it. If he doesn't care what he does, bomb every city, he could take it quickly. I think they're wanting to preserve infrastructure, right, and a lot of those things. They're hoping the people there will just surrender and give up. The problem for Israel's tiny. Israel obviously has nuclear weapons and all that, but Israel is as far as Jews living in Israel, it's 6 million people.
Right.
Russia has 1/8 of the landmass in the world. I was reading that
Wow.
recently. That's fascinating. They have an eighth of the world's landmass
Wow.
in Russia. Israel's the size of New Jersey.
Yeah.
So you're talking about just an overwhelming force, really. Now, Israel would have to use, in a war with someone like Russia, Israel would have to use nuclear weapons.
That's right. That's right.
To come out on top. They could defeat them in that way, but but Israel, one nuclear weapon in Israel, and the country,
Oh, yeah.
the whole country's gone.
Oh, yeah. Absolutely.
Whereas you hit Moscow or St. Petersburg, I mean, it's a huge, massive country.
This is Maggie. With Russia and China recently performing military drills together, North Korea having now missiles that can reach the U.S., and Iran in cahoots with them, could the U.S. be targeted for destruction? What do you think about that?
Well, I think that's what they all want. All of them want that, and I think a lot of them, though, are watching us kind of start collapsing from within.
Yeah,
We're so
that's right.
focused on climate change that we're really sabotaging our own economy, with oil and gas. And I think a lot of these countries are sitting and watching what's happening to our country and kind of allowing us to fall on our own sword.
Well, yeah.
I think there's probably a lot of that.
I heard someone say, and I really believe this is a very true observation, and that is we are so woke in our military. The present administration is so fixated, and that's just the truth, on making sure that the transgender is accepted into our military and all this kind of thing. And China is not woke. Russia is not woke. Iran is not woke. North Korea is not woke. They're not concerned about any of those politically correct issues. They're just building a military to destroy us. And so we are at such a disadvantage because of the weakness that we have shown the entire world. The withdrawal of Afghanistan, just on a tactical level, just showed how inept we have become. But this is something that's real troubling, is that the United States of America, we have the largest war machine in the world, but it's not the war machine that matters, it's the people behind that machine. And so, we are seeing the decline, and people ask, why isn't America in Bible prophecy? Or if we are, why are we not very pronounced? Well, obviously, we're not much of a factor at that point. Is that what you believe?
That's right. Yeah, I think we're going to be weak by that point. I mean, the words used, woke, I'd say we're woke and weak.
Woke and weak.
Where we're getting. We're woke and weak. And my view is that the rapture will and probably in convergence with other things that are all these other things we see happening in our culture that are weakening us. Then you add the rapture on top of that,
right?
Where all the salt and light's taken out. Let's say 8% of the people in America are really believers. That's 30 million people.
That's right.
That are extracted. I mean, you talk about a drop on the Dow Jones the next day.
That's right.
Our military being everything sucked out of our country. It's we would become a third-rate nation overnight.
Yeah, that's right. Hey everyone, thanks for watching our YouTube channel. To stay up to date with the latest end times content, make sure to hit the subscribe button on YouTube right now. The clip you're about to watch is from our weekly Tipping Point show. To get the full show and other end times content from great teachers like Greg Laurie, Dr. Mark Hitchcock, and myself, join us as a member on endtimes.com for $7 a month. Enjoy this clip. I want to talk about Israel. I want to talk about the end times. That's what we do here on endtimes.com, is just talk about a lot of current event stuff. What's happening right now in Russia and the Ukraine. Tell me, beginning with, I guess, Russia and the Ukraine, is there anything prophetic about that in your mind related to current events and what's going on?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the majority of the rabbis understand Gog as connected to the land of Russia. And so obviously anything that goes on in that region is super significant, right? Gog is described as someone who comes from the far north, Ezekiel 38:15. Oh. And Jewish thought the dwelling place and stronghold of the forces of evil is from the north. And so from, Jewish tradition is very clear that, it's almost unanimous that Gog is connected to Russia. And this, and so what's interesting is this, though, there is one of the greatest Jewish scholars to ever live was known as the Vilna of Gaon, and he was an Alui, he was a genius. And this is, and he's speaking prophetically, this is what he says. He says, when you see the Russian Navy pass through the Bosphorus on the way to the Mediterranean by the means of the Dardanelles. It will be time to put on Shabbat clothes, meaning the Messiah is coming soon.
Oh my gosh.
So, I mean, when you hear something like one of the greatest and most revered Jewish scholars that lived, hundreds and hundreds of years ago, say something like that, and you look at what's going on in world events, you're like, okay, something is going on here.
Well, the Gog, it's interesting you said that. I preached a message last weekend at Fellowship Church. We go here in Grapevine, Texas. And I was talking about, is Vladimir Putin Gog? And some of my friends, like Dr. Mark Hitchcock, he says he's Gog-esque. You can't definitively say he's Gog. However, my comment during my message was, if you ask me to, if Ezekiel 38 is a now prophecy, Vladimir Putin is Gog. I mean, because Gog is a person, Magog is a land. The other places are regions. The nations of Ezekiel 38 are places where he has control. The other nations listed there. But I really appreciate you saying that in the Jewish mind, Gog is Russia, because you have a lot of Western theologians who argue with that, and they'll say Gog has nothing to do with Russia. Gog is this, whatever. But if you look at the realities of it right now, the Gog and then the Magog nations of the Stan states. You have Turkey, Iran. These nations are all aligned with Russia, and they all hate Israel. So
yeah, and there's this old tradition, Jewish understanding that Meshech and Tuval, Meshech and Tubal, were in Russia, somewhere located in Russia, and there was this Rabbi Ibn Shaprut, who said, he wrote a letter to this group of this nation called the Khazaria, and there's this whole nation that converted in was now Russia or Eastern Europe to believe converted to Judaism. And he wrote to this leader of Khazaria, and calling him, and this is how he addressed him. He addressed him as the leader of Meshech and Tubal.
Huh. Wow.
Right. So I mean, there's numerous references that connect back, and from a Jewish perspective, Gog is connected to is European. He's a European leader. He's a descendant of Armilius, which is connected to Romulus, which is the founder of Rome, which is the fourth kingdom. I don't know if we want to, of Daniel's beasts, if we want to go into all there. But he's so in Jewish tradition, he has to be kind of Western. He has to be a descendant of Esau and Edom. That's a whole nother interesting thing. All the end time, all the 10 horns and the 11th horn mentioned in Daniel, all descendants of Edom and Esau. And Magog, on the other hand, is seen as a nation that's descended from Japheth, one of the descendants of Noah. So you have someone from Esau, Edom, which represents the West in Jewish thought, ruling over a land that's primarily of, Japheth.
Is that what you see today with Gog, Magog, all the nations there?
Yeah. And again, Persia would be one of those nations that are the descendants of Japheth, right? So it's no surprise that in this end, you kind of see this you kind of see this going on. You actually see it in the book of Esther, which just passed, right? So you have Haman, who is a descendant of Esau and a descendant of Amalek, being a key ruler in Persia, and Persia is a is a descendant of Japheth, right? So you have someone who is an outsider coming in,
Wow.
Stirring it up to destroy the Jewish people. This is exactly the picture of what's going to happen in the end. And Ezekiel mentions Persia as being one of the nations that are going to come in the battle of Gog and Magog to destroy. But the interesting thing is that in Hebrew, again, in our last show, we talked about the numerics, right? So the interesting thing is that in Hebrew, Gog and Magog, Gog and Magog, has a numerical value of 70. And that's very significant because 70, according to the 5 books of Moses, 70 descendants of Jacob went down to Egypt. There are 70. Nations biblically. So the way the biblical worldview is that there's 70 nations other than Israel that exist, and the picture of Gog and Magog is the 70 nations coming against Israel in the end of days. And this number 70 also ties back to the Tower of Babel, because when God confused the languages, he confused them into the 70 languages that become the 70 nations.
Wow.
And so this leader of Gog and Magog has this, it's the same spirit and the same worldview as the Tower of Babel, that we're going to build in order to overthrow God, rebel against God, his plans and purposes. And that's the idea of what the thinking of these end times enemies.
Well, that's exactly what you see happening right now. I want to thank you for watching this Tipping Point clip. And I want you to subscribe to the channel. I want you, if you're not a subscriber, go ahead and click subscribe there. And thank you for watching and subscribing. I want you to join our Tipping Point community at endtimes.com. For $7 a month, you can subscribe and you have a 7-day free trial. So if you just want to check it out for 7 days, go on endtimes.com, check us out for 7 days. But I can promise you, you're going to love the content. You're going to be getting the Tipping Point show, the full show, every single week, as well as articles and video content from great teachers like Greg Laurie and Mark Hitchcock, and of course myself. Be sure to subscribe to be notified when we release more videos like this. God bless you.